They laughed at the widow's lantern, but that tiny flame carried a secret so dark it nearly destroyed an entire family. On one storm-struck night, a lost child followed its glow, and what that lantern revealed would shatter everything his powerful father tried to bury. For years, the town whispered she was mad, yet the truth hidden in that light was more terrifying and more beautiful than anyone could imagine. Stay with me for just one more minute, and I'll tell you how a widow's simple lantern turned into a beacon of salvation and exposed a sin no one saw coming. And as you listen, I'd love to know how this story makes you feel. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if you'd like more stories like this, subscribe so you never miss the next light waiting to shine. I wish you a warm and gentle day. Snow fell heavy over Riverton that night, the kind of snow that muffled every sound until the town itself seemed to hold its breath. The streets, narrow and crooked, lay buried under white drifts. Wooden porches sagged with frost, lanterns swung weakly against the wind, and the church bell, iced over, stood silent in its tower. Beyond the town's edge, where the prairie rose into a slope of pines, one small farmhouse clung stubbornly against the storm. Its windows glowed with a faint amber light, not from hearth fire, but from a single lantern set in the window, steady, unwavering, like an eye that refused to close. That lantern belonged to Martha Keaton. Martha was 40, though the last 5 winters had carved her face deeper than her years deserved. A widow, she wore her grief in quiet ways, in the silver streaks woven through her dark hair, in the hollowness beneath her gray-blue eyes, and in the way her lips pressed together as if holding back words she no longer dared to speak. Her figure remained tall, broad-shouldered from years of farm work, yet there was a fragility in her posture, a stoop that whispered of nights spent awake, listening to the wind. She lived with her 7-year-old daughter Lydia, and together they carried the silence of a man no longer there. Every night, without fail, Martha lit the lantern. She placed it in the window facing the road, flame trembling against the glass as if it could pierce the storm itself. Townsfolk whispered that grief had turned her mad, that she clung to superstition like driftwood in a flood. They laughed in hushed tones at the general store. That widow still calling her husband back with a lantern? But Martha did not care. For her, the light was more than ritual. It was memory. It was promise. It was her last defiance against the darkness. Inside the house, Lydia sat curled on a worn chair, her blonde hair tangled, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. She was small for her age, pale like winter wheat, but her green eyes were wide with the kind of faith that children carry without question. She watched her mother tend the lantern, watched the flame grow taller, and whispered, "Mama, do you think he sees it tonight?" Martha's hand stilled on the glass chimney. For a moment, the storm's howl seemed to rise, pressing against the walls. She turned, kneeling beside her daughter, brushing strands of hair from the girl's face. "Maybe not tonight," she said softly, "but light has a way of finding those who are lost." That answer was enough for Lydia. She leaned into her mother's arms, sighing with the ease of a child who still believed. Outside, the snow thickened, falling in diagonal sheets that erased the horizon. The prairie became endless white. But somewhere within that storm, a smaller figure moved, barely a shadow against the dark. A boy, no more than 6, stumbled through the drifts, his thin coat torn, his boots soaked through. His face was raw with windburn, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes glazed with fear. Every breath came like a knife. Yet above the roar of the storm, he caught sight of something, a glimmer, a flame in a window. He pushed toward it, tripping, crawling, dragging himself through snow until his knees gave way. Inside the farmhouse, Lydia stiffened. She had been staring at the lantern, humming to herself, when she saw the faintest movement outside, a blot against the snow. She pressed her face to the glass. "Mama," she whispered, "someone's there." Martha straightened, heart quickening. For years she had dreamed of a shadow returning, her husband's form crossing the field, the lantern guiding him home. But this shadow was small, unsteady. Her breath caught as she opened the door. The storm clawed inside, cold air stinging her skin, but in the blur of white she saw him. A boy collapsed at the threshold, snow clinging to his hair, hands bruised and bleeding. She knelt, gathering him into her arms. His body was frail, his weight too light for his years, and when his eyes lifted to hers, they were dark, with something deeper than cold. Terror. "God help us," Martha whispered, dragging him inside, shutting the door against the wind. The boy trembled violently as she laid him near the fire. Lydia hovered close, clutching a blanket, her eyes round with both fear and wonder. Martha worked quickly, stripping the wet coat, wrapping him in wool, rubbing his arms for warmth. She had no time for questions. The child was half frozen, but when his lips parted, his voice was thin and broken. "I saw the light. I followed the light." Martha glanced at the lantern in the window, its flame steady. For the first time in years, her heart shifted, not with grief, but with something startling, like a new beginning she had not dared imagine. The boy's name came later. Eli, 6 years old. He had wandered the storm alone, clothes torn, hands marked with bruises that spoke of more than weather. Martha asked little, sensing his fragility, but Lydia knelt by his side and whispered questions as only a child could. "Where's your home? Do you have a mama? Why are you out here?" Eli shook his head, lips pressed tight, and stared at the flickering lantern as though it were the only safe thing in the room. Hours passed. The storm raged, snow piling against the shutters, but inside the farmhouse a fragile peace settled. Martha brewed broth, spooned it slowly into Eli's mouth, and felt the boy lean into the warmth. Lydia fetched her rag doll, setting it beside him as an offering, her small voice bright against the gloom. "She'll watch over you when you sleep." Martha watched her daughter's kindness and felt a pang of pride mixed with sorrow. Lydia still carried innocence untouched by the world's cruelty, a faith Martha feared she could not protect forever. It might have ended there. A rescued boy, a house warmed against the storm. But near midnight, as the fire burned low, Eli stirred. His breath came fast, eyes darting toward the window. He clutched Martha's hand suddenly, nails digging into her skin. His voice broke, sharp with fear. "There's someone out there." Martha stilled. She followed his gaze to the frost-glazed window. Beyond the lantern's glow, the storm howled, yet through the blur she thought she saw it too, a darker shape standing still just beyond the field, a figure astride a horse, unmoving, watching. For a heartbeat, she thought it a trick of snow and shadow. Then the horse shifted, a faint gleam catching the rider's eyes, watching, waiting. The lantern flame flickered, and Martha's own breath faltered. Lydia clutched her doll tighter, sensing the tension. Eli whispered again, voice breaking like thin ice. "Someone is chasing me." The storm did not pass. It pressed harder against the wooden walls, rattling the shutters like bones in the dark. The lantern flame in the window swayed but did not falter, a steady eye in the blizzard. Yet Martha felt its glow tremble inside her chest, a fragile shield against the image of that rider she thought she saw in the storm. Unmoving, watching. Inside, the boy lay bundled in blankets, steam from the hearth curling in the air above his thin shoulders. His lashes trembled as he tried to keep his eyes open. His hands, small, bruised, and scraped raw, clutched the edge of the fabric as though afraid it would be taken from him. Martha moved closer. Her voice was low, careful, as if not to scare him away. "You're safe here," she whispered. "No one can harm you under this roof." Yet even as she said it, her gaze flicked toward the frosted glass, where snow streaked sideways under the lantern's glow. Her words were a promise her heart did not fully believe. Lydia sat at the boy's side, her own small hands folding the blanket tighter around him. "What's your name?" she asked softly. His lips moved, cracked and pale. "Eli." The word broke into the room like a secret. Martha repeated it silently. Eli, a name she had never heard in this town. The fire hissed as a log split, throwing sparks. Eli stirred, turning slightly in the glow. Around his neck, beneath the torn collar of his shirt, something glinted. Martha reached forward, meaning to adjust the blanket, and her fingers brushed against it, a silver chain. Hanging from it was a small pendant, oval, worn by cold. She caught a glimpse of the engraving, a single letter cut deep into the metal. R. Her breath stilled. In Riverton, the name Rowan carried weight like iron. A family, wealthy, powerful, feared. She closed her fingers around the pendant, gently lifting it. "Where did you get this?" Eli's eyes flickered with panic. He pulled back, clutching it against his chest, as if it were the only thing he owned. It was always mine." His voice shook, but behind the fear lay defiance, something strong that had not yet been broken. Martha's stomach knotted. Rowan. If this child bore their mark, then danger already shadowed her doorstep. The wind howled louder, shaking the lantern glass. Martha drew the curtain half closed, but her mind refused to quiet. She had seen too many nights of loss to mistake chance for fate. Lydia, innocent of the storm inside her mother's chest, smiled at Eli. "It's pretty. My papa once gave Mama a silver locket. She still keeps it, even now." Martha's throat tightened. The girl's words fell like snowflakes, gentle but sharp enough to cut. She glanced at the mantel, where the locket sat in its small wooden box. She had never opened it since that day. Eli's eyes darted to the fire, then back to Martha. His voice fell to a whisper, brittle as glass. "My father doesn't want me anymore." The words dropped heavy, heavier than the storm's weight on the roof. Martha froze, searching his young face. He did not look away. "He said I was a mistake, that he should have never kept me. He sent me away, into the snow." Lydia gasped, pressing her hand over her mouth. Her eyes glistened wide with horror. "No father should say that," she whispered. Martha felt her chest twist, rage, pity, sorrow, all at once. She knew too well the sting of abandonment, though hers had been the grave's doing, not cruelty. She reached for Eli's hand. It was small, trembling, but when she closed her palm around it, he gripped as if holding to life itself. For a moment, silence held the room. The storm raged outside, but within the fire's glow, time seemed to pause. Martha looked into the boy's eyes and saw not just fear, but something else, the desperate need to belong. And then, a sound, faint, metallic, the creak of leather from outside. Martha's head snapped toward the window. Her pulse surged hot in her throat. Snow still whipped in blinding sheets, but between the gusts she caught it again, the silhouette of the rider, closer now, looming against the lantern's glow. The horse's breath steamed like smoke. The rider's face, shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, did not move, but his eyes, oh, she could feel them. The lantern's flame struck the glass of his gaze, two tiny sparks reflecting back into the night. Eli whimpered, pressing himself deeper into the chair, his hand clutching Martha's sleeve. Lydia's doll slipped from her grasp and thudded softly on the floor. Martha's breath came sharp, fast. The storm seemed to pound in rhythm with her heartbeat. She moved to the lantern, shielding it with her hand as if to hide its light, but the rider did not leave. He watched, patient, silent. The room shrank around her. The walls creaked. Every board in the house seemed to know. Danger had found them. The storm had quieted by dawn, leaving Riverton draped in a brittle silence. Snow lay thick along the narrow main street, crunching under wagon wheels and boots. Smoke rose from chimneys, curling against the pale winter sky. The church stood at the center, its steeple dark against the white horizon, bells iced over, unmoving. But the heavy oak doors were open, lanterns lit inside, a place of refuge. Martha guided Eli across the frozen path, Lydia clutching her hand. The boy's steps faltered often, his small boots slipping on the ice, yet he pressed on, gaze fixed ahead as if afraid to look back. Martha felt his trembling through her glove. Her own breath came in clouds, and each step closer to the church seemed both salvation and a surrender she did not yet understand. Inside, the church smelled of wood smoke and old hymnals. The pews gleamed with frost where drafts cut through, and the great cross at the altar glowed faint in the lantern's halo. At the end of the aisle stood Reverend Caleb Monroe, a man in his late 50s, tall and spare, with a lined face that bore both sternness and kindness. His gray hair fell neatly, his dark coat brushed with snow. Caleb's eyes, pale blue, carried the look of one who had witnessed too much grief to be surprised by more. "Martha," he said, voice low but steady, carrying through the hollow space, "you've come early, and with company." Martha drew Eli forward. The boy's small frame looked swallowed in the borrowed coat, his face pale against the flickering lamplight. Lydia stayed close, eyes flicking nervously from her mother to the Reverend. Caleb crouched, his knees cracking softly, to meet Eli's gaze. "And who is this young traveler?" Eli hesitated. His lips moved, but no sound came. Finally, he whispered, "Eli." Caleb's eyes softened. "Well, Eli, you've found your way to safe ground." His hand reached gently, not touching, only hovering near the boy's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. But Martha's eyes caught something at Eli's throat. The chain glinted again. The silver pendant. She had hoped it might go unnoticed, but the lantern light betrayed it. Caleb's eyes sharpened as he leaned closer. His long fingers brushed the pendant free from Eli's collar. He turned it toward the light. The single letter gleamed. R. Caleb's expression shifted, controlled but heavy. He rose slowly, the chain dangling from his fingers. "This," he murmured, "is not an ordinary trinket." Martha's chest tightened. "You know it?" Caleb's jaw clenched. "Rowan, the family crest, their mark. They've been searching for a child gone missing, though no one speaks of it openly." His eyes flicked to Martha's. "If this boy carries it, he is bound by blood to them." Eli's face drained of color. His hands shot out, snatching the pendant back, holding it as if it were his very breath. "Don't let them take me," he whispered, voice cracking. Martha knelt beside him, her heart thundering. She had known the name Rowan since girlhood, wealthy landowners with iron grips on Riverton's trade and politics, men who smiled in daylight but left fear in their wake. If Eli belonged to them, then he was not safe. He was trapped. Caleb's gaze lingered, heavy with thought. "This could bring you danger, Martha. The Rowans do not give up what they claim is theirs." Martha's voice sharpened, louder than she intended, echoing through the church rafters. "He's a child, Caleb, not a possession." Her own words shook, but she steadied herself. "I won't hand him back to men who cast him aside." The Reverend's eyes softened, but his silence said more than words. He knew what defiance against such a family might cost. A draft slipped through the church doors, scattering dust motes in the light. Eli clung tighter to Martha's arm, his breathing shallow. Lydia pressed against her mother's side, her small hand searching blindly for comfort. And then, the door slammed wide. Snow gusted in, scattering across the stone floor. A man stepped through, tall, broad, wrapped in a dark wool coat. His hair, black streaked with silver, was combed slick, his mustache sharp above a cold, thin mouth. His boots struck the floor with authority. His eyes, dark, hawk-like, scanned the room and settled on Eli. "I've come for the boy," he declared. His voice was iron. "I am his uncle." Martha rose, positioning herself between him and Eli. "And who might you be?" "Edward Rowan," the man answered, pulling off his gloves, revealing long, bony fingers. His gaze flicked to the pendant at Eli's chest. "That chain proves what blood he carries. He belongs with us." Eli whimpered, the sound sharp, animal-like. His hands clutched Martha's skirt, knuckles white. Tears streaked his wind-chapped cheeks. "Don't let him take me," he sobbed. His voice grew louder, higher, echoing through the wooden rafters. "Please, Mama, please." The words slipped. "Mama." Martha's heart broke open at the sound, even as her body tensed. She bent, wrapping him close, whispering fiercely, "I'm here. No one's taking you." Edward's eyes narrowed. "Do not delude yourself, Widow Keaton. That child is of Rowan blood, and he will return where he belongs." His words cracked like a whip, his presence swelling like the storm outside. Caleb stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is holy ground, Edward. You will not seize the boy here by force." Edward's lips curled. "You think your church walls protect you from the truth?" His gaze burned into Martha's. "The law will, and when it does, you'll regret standing in the way of family." Eli's sobs broke harder, his body shaking as he clung to Martha. "I won't go! I won't go!" His cries pierced the silence like shattered glass. He buried his face in her coat, fingers gripping with desperate strength. Martha's own tears threatened, but she held firm, her arms a barrier of flesh and will. Her lantern-light faith burned in her chest. She whispered to him, though her eyes never left Edward's, "You are not alone, Eli. Not anymore." The church doors groaned in the wind, slamming once more as the storm clawed inside. Shadows stretched long across the pews. And in that moment, the boys' cries, the uncle's claim, the reverend silence, the whole town's fate seemed to hang in the balance. Night fell hard over Riverton. The storm had eased, but the silence it left behind was heavier, more suffocating than the roar of wind. Snow blanketed the fields in a pale crust that gleamed under a clouded moon, and every sound, the creak of wood, the faint drip of melting ice, felt sharpened, amplified, as if the world itself leaned close to listen. Inside the Keaton farmhouse, Martha lit the lantern. Not as before, with its soft glow by the window, but higher, brighter, the flame trembling tall in its glass. She set it upon the table, her hands lingering on the warm metal. The light painted her face in gold and shadow, and she whispered under her breath, "Show me what I need to see." Lydia and Eli sat near the hearth. The boy was quiet, staring into the fire with wide, restless eyes, clutching the silver pendant at his chest. Lydia leaned close to him, offering the comfort of her presence, though her gaze kept wandering back to her mother. She sensed something different in Martha tonight, a weight, a silent prayer wrapped in the crackle of flame. The house breathed with them, the old beams groaned softly. The wind prowled at the shutters. In that quiet, Lydia fidgeted with the lantern, tracing her finger along its brass frame. She tilted it, just slightly, and something caught, a hollow sound, faint, like paper hidden within. "Mama," Lydia said suddenly, lifting her head. "There's something inside." Martha froze. Her eyes met her daughter's, and for an instant the world seemed to narrow to that single object, the lantern that had been her ritual, her lifeline, her nightly vigil. She stepped forward, took it carefully, and unscrewed the base. Dust fell out first. Then, folded, yellowed, brittle, a piece of paper. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The edges tore in places, the ink blurred from damp and time. But the handwriting was familiar, so achingly familiar that her breath caught in her throat. It was her husband's hand. "Martha, if this reaches you," her knees weakened. She sank to the chair, the lantern casting flickers over the page. The words sprawled unevenly, unfinished, as if written in haste. "They asked me to keep what should never be hidden. Rowan blood walks outside their walls, and they will bury the truth in fire, if need be. If I do not return, guard the light. It may lead not only me, but those who wander lost." The ink trailed off, a line broken mid-stroke. Martha pressed the letter against her chest, eyes burning. He had known. He had carried secrets for the Rowans, and perhaps because of those secrets he had never come home. Her heart pounded. Was Eli that hidden truth? Was he the reason her husband had kept the lantern burning long before she took it as her own ritual? Eli shifted uncomfortably, his small voice breaking into the silence. "And what does it say?" Martha looked at him. The child's eyes were too old for his face, shadowed by fear. She wanted to shield him, to protect him from the venom of names and bloodlines. But the truth pressed against her like the winter wind, inescapable. She folded the letter with trembling fingers. "It says your life matters," she whispered, "more than they want the world to know." Eli clutched his pendant tighter, as if the silver alone could anchor him. Lydia crawled closer, her small hand sliding into his. "See?" she said softly. "Mama won't let anyone take you." Martha tried to smile, but her chest was a battlefield. Her husband's ghost whispered in one ear, warning her of danger. Her daughter's innocent faith tugged at the other, and Eli, fragile, trembling Eli, looked at her as though she were the last barrier between him and the dark. The lantern flame sputtered, then rose higher, as if answering some unspoken call. Its light licked across the wooden walls, stretched shadows long, and then the sound. Hooves, at first faint, then louder, rhythmic, relentless. Martha's head jerked toward the window. Beyond the glass, snow glowed pale. Shapes moved within it, dark and many. The sound grew, a dozen hooves pounding frozen ground, bridles clinking, men's voices muffled through scarves. Eli's breath hitched, sharp, terrified. "They found me?" The shutters rattled as if struck by the wind, but Martha knew better. She rose, fists clenched, the letter still in her grip. From the yard, a shout cut the night, the scrape of boots, the growl of men. Then, fists slamming against the door. The lantern shook on the table, its flame flaring tall. Shadows of men crossed the frosted glass. Lydia screamed. Eli buried himself against Martha's side. And outside, Richard Rowan's voice thundered through the storm-dark yard, low, commanding, filled with menace. "Open this door, Widow Keaton, or we'll break it down." The house itself seemed to tremble at his words. Martha stood still, the letter in one hand, her daughter and Eli in the other. The lantern's flame blazed high, its glow fierce, unyielding. The storm was not outside anymore. It was here, pressing against her very door. The pounding at the door grew louder, each strike like a drum of war. Snow flurried in from the gaps of the shutters, and the lantern's flame swayed high, refusing to die. Martha stood rooted in the center of the room, clutching Eli and Lydia close, her breath sharp in her chest. Her husband's letter weighed heavy in her pocket, like a ghost whispering her to hold firm. Another crash at the door. Wood splintered. The voices outside barked orders, rough and eager, the sound of men who had done this before. Martha's hands trembled, but her eyes burned. She seized the lantern from the table, lifted it high. The flame caught her face in gold and shadow. Her voice cracked the air. "If you mean to break me, the town will see you do it." She pushed past the children, flung open the upstairs window, and raised the lantern high above the snowy yard. Its glow burst against the night, brighter than any star. The flame roared inside its glass as if it knew the weight of the moment, leaping tall, licking at the brass. The men outside cursed, shielding their eyes. One hissed, "She's calling them. She's calling the whole town." The light spread across Riverton's edge, spilling down the slope toward the valley. Farmers at their barns, women closing shutters, children pressed against frost glass windows, all lifted their heads to the glow. The lantern burned like a beacon, like a cry. Come, see, witness. Below, the door shuddered again. Eli clutched Martha's skirt, his voice thin. "They'll come in, Mama, they'll take me." "Not if the light stays burning," Martha whispered, pressing his face to her side. The door finally gave. Wood cracked, hinges screamed, and the men spilled in. Coats dusted with snow, scarves wrapped high, eyes hard. One carried a length of chain, another a crowbar. Martha stepped forward, lantern still raised. Her hand shook, but she steadied it, forcing her voice strong. "You'll have to face this light before you touch him." The men hesitated, shadows long across the floor. The lantern threw their faces into harsh relief, creases of greed, the twitch of hesitation. Then, from outside, another sound, boots crunching snow, a voice ringing clear. "Enough!" The intruders froze. Through the torn door, Reverend Caleb Monroe strode in, his long coat whipping with the wind. Behind him, half a dozen townsfolk pushed forward, men with axes, women with rifles, even boys clutching pitchforks. Their faces were pale in the lantern glow, but their eyes blazed. Caleb's voice filled the room, stern, unyielding. "No one takes a child from this house tonight." The intruders snarled, shoving back, but they were outnumbered. The townsfolk pressed forward, the fire of the lantern mirrored in their determination. The room bristled, breaths hot, boots scuffing against the wood. And then it happened. One of the masked men was seized by Caleb's hand. His scarf tore free. The lantern light struck his face. A gasp rippled through the room. Richard Rowan. His dark hair was streaked with silver, his jaw sharp as a blade, his mouth curled into fury. But it was his eyes, the same shape as Eli's, the same deep color that froze the breath in Martha's chest. Eli saw it too. He recoiled, stumbling back, shaking his head. "No! No!" Richard straightened, throwing aside his coat. His voice thundered. "The boy is mine, my blood, my mistake, and I will see him erased from this world before I let him shame me further." Gasps filled the room. One woman crossed herself. Caleb stepped forward, fists clenched, but Richard's fury rolled over them all. Martha's stomach twisted. Her husband's letter echoed in her mind. Rowan blood outside their walls. This was it. This was the truth. She looked at Eli, trembling, clutching his pendant like a shield. She felt Lydia's small hand slip into hers, and in that moment, fear turned to flame. "You abandoned him," Martha said, her voice shaking but clear. "You forfeited the right to call yourself his father. He belongs with those who choose him." Richard's face contorted. Sweat glistened on his brow, even in the cold. His breath steamed as he raised a hand, signaling his men to press forward, but the townsfolk surged, too, axes and rifles raised, the room held on a knife's edge. Then, in one motion, Richard drew a revolver from his coat. The metal gleamed in the lantern's blaze. He leveled it at Martha's chest. Eli screamed. Lydia sobbed. The room erupted in shouts. But Richard's voice cut through it all, ragged and furious, louder than the storm. "The boy belongs to me. No one stands in my way." The revolver gleamed in the lantern light, cold steel trembling in Richard Rowan's grip. His breath steamed against the night air, spilling through the broken door, sweat dripping down his temple despite the chill. Every eye in the room locked on him. Every heartbeat seemed to pause. And then Eli moved. The boy tore free from Lydia's side, his bare feet slapping against the wooden floor. He ran not away but forward, straight toward Martha. His small hands latched onto her arm, clinging, trembling, but unyielding. "Don't let him take me," Eli cried, his voice piercing, breaking the silence. Richard's hand faltered. His aim wavered, the barrel dipping by an inch. In that inch was hesitation. In that hesitation, defeat. The crowd outside surged closer, their boots stomping snow into the threshold. The Reverend Caleb Monroe's voice rang above the din. "Drop the gun, Richard. It's over." The lantern swung in Martha's raised hand, light striking Richard's face, unmasking him fully. His rage, his shame, the thin film of fear at the edges of his eyes. The boy's touch had pierced through his armor more than any weapon could. For one long moment the storm seemed to hush. Snow drifted lazily past the shattered doorframe. The wind sighed against the rafters. Martha could hear her own heart pounding, could feel Lydia's breath quick and shallow at her side. Richard's jaw clenched, his finger twitched at the trigger, but he saw his own reflection in Eli's eyes, eyes that mirrored his own, and something inside him recoiled. The gun clattered to the floor. A roar erupted from the townsfolk. Some surged forward, seizing his arms. Richard stumbled, fighting, cursing, but the strength of many bore him down. He was dragged into the snow, his face pressed against the icy ground, lantern light chasing him out the door. Martha collapsed to her knees, pulling Eli and Lydia into her arms. The children sobbed into her chest, and she buried her face in their hair. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to tremble, not with fear, but with release. Outside, voices shouted. "The Rowan name will rot after this," one man spat. Another woman, shawl tight around her shoulders, muttered, "Blood don't excuse cruelty." Richard's curses faded into the night as he was dragged away, humiliated, his power broken. Inside, calm slowly returned. The lantern's flame crackled, steady, refusing to dim. Caleb knelt near Martha, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His eyes, worn but kind, carried a quiet authority. "He has no claim," Caleb said softly. "By law, by God, by his own abandonment, the boy stays here, if you'll have him." Martha lifted her gaze. Her face streaked with tears, her hair undone, yet her eyes burned with fierce clarity. She looked at Eli, small and broken, yet unyielding, clutching that silver pendant as though it were both curse and proof. "I'll have him," Martha whispered, "as if he were my own blood." Eli stared up at her, lips trembling. For the first time since she had seen him, a fragile hope flickered in his expression. He pressed his face into her, and the sob that escaped was not fear, but release. The room quieted. Outside, the storm slackened, the snow easing to a soft fall. The night itself seemed to exhale. Martha rose slowly, still holding the children. She carried them to the hearth, where the fire smoldered low. With steady hands, she set the lantern back on the table. The flame shimmered against the glass, the brass warmed to the touch. She trimmed the wick, added oil. The glow leapt brighter. She spoke then, not to the crowd, not even to Caleb, but to her daughter. Her voice was tender, almost reverent. The light was never just to bring your father home, Lydia. It was to lead those who were lost to us. And tonight, it brought Eli. Lydia's small hand squeezed her mother's, her wide eyes shining in the flame. Then we'll never put it out, Mama. Martha kissed the girl's forehead, her heart swelling. Never. The townsfolk began to leave, their murmurs fading into the snowy dark. Caleb lingered by the doorway, his figure silhouetted in the glow. He nodded once, firm and approving, before stepping into the night. The door was shut. Silence returned. Martha settled by the fire, wrapping both children in blankets. Lydia leaned into her shoulder. Eli pressed close at her other side. The storm outside had gentled, a hush that promised morning. The lantern's glow filled the room, flickering soft across the walls. Its light reached the window, casting a beacon into the night one last time. Beyond, the horizon began to pale, the first touch of dawn breaking through. Martha breathed deeply, her eyes lifting to that dawn. For the first time since her husband's passing, she felt not empty but whole. She whispered, almost a prayer, "We are found." In the quiet town of Riverton, a widow's lantern was never just a light in the window. It was a promise that even in the darkest nights, compassion can guide us home. Martha's courage, Lydia's innocence, and Eli's fragile hope remind us that family is not bound only by blood, but by the hands that choose to hold us when we are most lost. The lantern's flame may flicker, but its meaning endures. Kindness, once lit, can lead even the most broken heart toward dawn. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and share this video with someone who might need a little light tonight. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss the next story waiting to shine its way into your heart.